The king is dead, long live the king, or so the saying goes, and today some are saying that a certain type of field artillery, which has long been called the king of battle, is dead and is being succeeded by systems like HIMARS and even drones. The truth is that long-range fire just ain't what it used to be. Ever since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the headlines have been filled with HIMARS rockets that can hit targets nearly 200 miles away, hypersonic missiles that can reach Mach 11, and loitering munitions and one-way attack drones that can literally put warheads on foreheads. Meanwhile, the US Marine Corps traded 2/3 of its howitzer batteries for rockets and anti-ship missiles, and the US Army's 25th Infantry Division started down a similar road this summer. So the question is the king, at least in the form of good old-fashioned tube artillery, actually dead? The answer is complicated. Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm Kyle, and today we are going to answer that question, or at least try to, by talking about how the battlefield seems to be leaving the king behind, how tube artillery will have to change to keep up with modern warfare, and what leaders are doing now to make that happen. But before we get to that, a quick word from today's sponsor, Odoo. If you're in manufacturing, you already know the challenges. Orders stack up, delays start sneaking in, all your tools that are supposed to make your life easier start to do the opposite. Odoo fixes that. Odoo gives you one dashboard where you can manage assembly stations, check load times, track work orders, keep up with shipments. Everything that happens on your floor, you can see. Their barcode app makes it easy to scan and log components in real time right from the production line. So you spend less time fixing data errors and more time getting orders out the door. Need to check a worksheet or bill of materials? It's all right there, right in the dashboard, connected and synced. With Odoo, you have everything covered from planning to production with smooth and simple software. Start with your first app for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com. You'll be happy you did, and we'd like to thank Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. The definition of artillery has changed a lot over the years, but today it generally means big guns with a big caliber. But there are lots of kinds of artillery, such as mortars, which can be carried on the backs of mortarmen or whoever draws the short straw. Howitzers are a step up from that, generally firing larger projectiles over longer distances, but they can also fire directly at an enemy rather than in a big arc. In this video, when we talk about tube artillery, we're talking about howitzers because they all have big honking tubes on them. Today, the US military fields two kinds of howitzers, the self-propelled kind, which looks like a tank but with a big artillery gun on top, and don't you dare call them a tank because the army bubbas will cry and put a curse on you, and then there's the towed kind, which are pulled behind a truck or lifted by a helicopter to move around the battlefield. Then there's rocket artillery, which in the US Army and Marine Corps takes the form of the M142 HIMARS, while the Army also has the larger M270. Both of these can carry a range of guided rockets, which are usually called missiles, and unguided rockets, which are usually just called rockets. If you're confused, just call everything a missile and somebody will be along shortly to correct you. Let's start by discussing HIMARS in a little more detail. HIMARS technically stands for High Mobility Artillery Rocket System. As we've seen, rocket artillery plays a crucial role in Ukraine, where Ukrainian troops use HIMARS and other MLRS, that's multiple launch rocket systems, supplied by the US and European allies to hit Russian command and control nodes, logistics centers, high-ranking officers, and large concentrations of Russian troops. That success there builds on years of strikes against Taliban and ISIS fighters in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. On the other side of the fight, Russia is using its own rocket artillery platforms in essentially the same ways with great effect. While rocket artillery has been around in some shape or form for about 800 years, HIMARS and MLRS can now reach out to about 50 miles, or with the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, that range can go out to 186 miles. This puts those batteries out of reach for Russian tube artillery trying to hit them back with counter-battery fire. It can also put it out out of range of small drones, even the fiber optic kind, which typically cap out at about 30 to 40 miles. Missiles fired by HIMARS today are much more accurate than in the past thanks to GPS, internal guidance systems, and a vast network of eyeballs on the front lines. That network includes small drones acting as forward observers, apps that let Ukrainian citizens report the location of Russian troops, and satellite imagery. When all that comes together, it means Ukrainian HIMARS can destroy a pinpoint target from really far away, then scoot away fast before a drone can spot them and send counter-battery fire. Range, precision, and mobility are also important in the Pacific, where US officials fear they may have to fight China in the near future. That's why the US Army's Hawaii-based 25th Infantry Division swapped 14 of its 105mm and 155mm howitzers with 16 HIMARS launchers. Their experience may inform whether other light divisions make that same change. The Marine Corps also had a Pacific fight in mind when it decided to cut most of its howitzer batteries and replace them with rocket artillery and anti-ship missiles. The shift is part of a concept called Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, or EBO, where small mobile groups of Marines flip between temporary outposts to sink ships, launch aircraft, and generally make it hard for the enemy to move ships and supplies over the ocean. EBO is just one part of Force Design 2030, which is a top-to-bottom redesign of the Marine Corps to prepare for war against a peer adversary such as China. But not even HIMARS is safe, as the Marine Corps divested some of those launchers and replaced them with the NMESIS, or Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, which was specifically designed for killing ships and can be fired off the top of a remote-controlled joint-like tactical vehicle. But while rocket and missile artillery are playing a larger role both on today's battlefields and in future US force structure, you never want to sleep on tube artillery, and here's why. Artillery is the biggest killer in the war in Ukraine, accounting for more than 70% of Ukrainian combat casualties, according to one estimate from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, a London-based think tank. While GPS-guided missiles are important, most of the horrible stuff flying overhead is just dumb metal guided by gravity and ballistics. Ukraine peaked at firing about 9,000 artillery shells a day, but that petered off to fewer than 1,800 a day in early 2024, according to RUSI. Russia, meanwhile, has fired between 7,000 and 16,000 shells a day, though it peaked at around 38,000 a day in June 2022. There are a few reasons why both sides are firing so much artillery at each other. The first is that artillery is the cornerstone of the Russian way of war. Basically, the rest of the Russian military is meant to support the artillery as it clears obstacles and flattens the enemy. Besides doctrine, artillery shells are usually cheaper than rockets, they have a higher sustained rate of fire, and they work regardless of weather or enemy jamming, which can disrupt the guidance systems of precision missiles. They also can't be easily intercepted like slower cruise missiles or rockets can. Neither side can pierce each other's air defenses in any meaningful way, so artillery is really the only way to bring down a massive amount of indirect fire. Ukrainian soldiers and officials told Reuters last year that the 155mm shell in particular provides a crucial combination of explosive power and extended range to kill Russian troops and armor. It also plays a psychological role, according to Volodymyr Havrilov, a former Ukrainian deputy defense minister. He told Reuters it's very important for our infantry to hear the sound of our artillery every hour just to understand that they are not alone in the field and there are guys behind them who are ready to support them. Unfortunately for Ukraine, Russia is way ahead of the US and Europe in terms of making new artillery shells, totaling about 2 million in 2024, with more factories on the way and a steady supply from their good friends in North Korea. Meanwhile, the Czech Republic basically scrounged shells from around the world last year just to keep Ukraine in the fight. Firing all those shells also wears out the barrels of the artillery pieces firing them. Right now, the US government's one factory for making M777 or 777 barrels can't keep up with Ukraine's demand for some 30 barrels a month, as our friends at the War Zone reported in January. The US Army plans to open a second factory for making those barrels, and it's investing $635 million in a new 155mm artillery shell factory in Iowa. The US also hopes to soon make 100,000 shells a month, and European countries are ramping up production too. All this goes to show that tube artillery is far from dead. In fact, it's in higher demand now than it's been in decades, but that doesn't mean it's easy. Tiny drones, artillery locating radar, satellites, and other technologies mean the troops being bombarded can start counter-battery fire much faster than in the past, with some Russian units able to do it in just 3 to 5 minutes. That leaves artillery crews with two options. One is to fortify their artillery positions with armor, nets, or electronic warfare systems to protect against drones, along with more camouflage to make them harder to find. One Ukrainian howitzer crew even put their gun in a trench with a folding roof. The other option is for crews to be able to fire and bug out before they can be targeted. But that's tricky to do with a towed weapon like the 777, which takes 5 to 8 minutes to set up, and another 7 to 8 minutes to pack up, as one retired artillery officer named Bill Cozier wrote for Defense News. By comparison, a self-propelled howitzer can set up in less than 3 minutes and be on the move in less than 2, and it has a lot more armor for the crews. U.S. officials seem to agree. General James Rainey, the head of U.S. Army Futures Command, said in 2024 that, "I personally believe that we have witnessed the end of the effectiveness of towed artillery. The future is not bright for towed artillery." That's not exactly breaking news for the Army, which has wanted to update its self-propelled howitzer fleet for more than 2 decades. Even the Army's Fire Support Field Manual says field artillery units should be as mobile as the units they support, but the Army hasn't made much progress on that. In fact, over the past 2 years, the service has awarded BAE Systems more than $200 million to restart some of its production lines to crank out more 777s. On the self-propelled side, we have the M109 Paladin, which the Army has operated in various forms since 1963. It can hurl a 155mm shell about 20 miles, but the Army wants something that moves faster, shoots further, and probably has more autonomy in order to slim down its 4-person crew. The Army started looking for a Paladin replacement in the early 1990s. First, there was the Crusader 155, but that was cancelled in 2002. Next up was the non-line of sight cannon, or NLOSC, which was cancelled in 2009. In 2018, the Army eyed the Extended Range Cannon Artillery, or ERCA, which would have doubled the Paladin's range to more than 43 miles, but the Army cancelled it in 2024 when the prototype gun tubes started wearing out too fast. So what's next? A lot more mulling it over. Last year, the Army sent a team to check out artillery systems in action around the world, and starting in January of 2026, the service wants to hold a 9-month demonstration for the top contenders in Arizona. Those contenders could include the Archer wheeled artillery system from BAE, which also makes the M777, and the Paladin. Elbit Systems, Rheinmetall, Hanwha Aerospace, and other countries might also want to show off their self-propelled howitzers. Most of these platforms have automated systems that can set their own fuses and load their own ammo and propellant, reducing the crew to just 2 people who can stay in an armored cabin up front the whole time. That, plus better computer systems for calculating ballistics and linking up with a wider battle management system, helps the howitzers set up, shoot off a half a dozen rounds, then get going again in under 3 minutes, hopefully avoiding counter-battery fire. Who knows, maybe in the future you might have a family of fully autonomous artillery pieces shooting and scooting around the battlefield, and we'll be back here talking about which artillery D2 we think has the best stats. But for now, the Army is sticking to upgrades, so let's get into that. Until we can get artillery D2, and I just had to use that again because that is so good. David wrote it. I couldn't write that because I've never seen Star Wars. Yeah, I know, spare me your attacks, nerds. But anyway, until we can get that, the Army has ordered another round of 24 M109A7 Paladins and is working with BAE to upgrade the other M109s it already has. And speaking of upgrades, General Atomics said it successfully tested a winged 155mm artillery shell fired from a 777. The company says the long-range maneuvering projectile, as it is called, is supposed to have a range of about 75 miles and reach precise targets in GPS-denied environments using onboard guidance. It's one of several efforts by the Army to extend the reach of its existing 155mm artillery pieces and put soldiers farther from the enemy. If you haven't picked up on it yet in this video, and basically all the other ones when we talk about weapons, range and mobility are the focus for pretty much everything these days, and that even goes for the artillery shells. We talked about 155mm a lot in this video, but that may not be the caliber to rule them all. Self-propelled howitzers of that size are too big to drop into combat with an airborne division, and while the 777 can be airdropped, it's slow to move around once it is in the field. An in-between could be something like the Hawkeye, a 155mm howitzer that fits on a Humvee. We haven't mentioned the Marines in a while, and if we don't, they'll probably get all sad, so let's remember that they're getting rid of most of their howitzers in favor of HIMARS and anti-ship missiles. Marine Captain Carl Flynn said in an essay for the U.S. Naval Institute that the Corps needs a self-propelled howitzer to provide close-up, flexible, indirect fire support. Unfortunately, the Marines can't just creatively requisition the Army's old Paladins, since those aren't amphibious and they're really heavy, but Flynn proposed making a self-propelled howitzer variant of the amphibious combat vehicle. He also called for a heavy mortar variant of the ACV to, as he put it, regain indirect fire support capacity. He went on to say tube artillery can generate long duration, albeit shorter range, indirect fires at a high volume with a wide variety of ammunition types, capabilities useful in counterinsurgency operations and high intensity combat. In other words, HIMARS and anti-ship missiles are great, but the war in Ukraine shows that tube artillery is still a huge factor on the battlefield. It just needs to move around a lot faster nowadays. Hopefully the US military can keep up, but for now the king is not dead, and long live the king. There you go, Redlegs. Merry Christmas. David Rosa wrote the script and Savvy edited the video, and now we're at channel update time. So I've been giving out my email, which is kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com, for any service members, veterans, or even civilians who just kind of find themselves low over the holidays. Maybe you're stuck in the barracks and it sucks. Maybe you went home and it sucks. Maybe the holidays are just not a great time for you and you're feeling low. You can feel free to reach out to me. I really hope you do. I've gotten a lot of emails. I'm going to respond to all of them. So if you sent me one and for some reason you haven't heard back yet, I'm getting to it. It's just a lot. I write a lot already. This is a lot of work. But I do promise I will reply, and it won't just be a, hey, what's up? Thanks. I'll actually, have a conversation. I really do enjoy that. So that offer is always open, even past the holidays. Go ahead and reach out to me with anything you have. All right. The store.taskandpurpose.com. We have a new code for 20% off. That is block leave, all one word. That gets you 20% off. That's a pretty good deal. These shirts are only 25 bucks. We don't make a whole lot of money on them. So go ahead and use it before the end of the year when, if I remember, I'm going to cancel that promotion code. Other than that, thinking into 2026, what we're gonna do, things are starting to get a little easier. I'm catching up. I'm not so behind anymore. It's been a lot to get caught up. So I'd like to get out and do some on the ground stuff, which would be really cool. Also thinking about doing a newsletter, either weekly or twice a week, where I spend a lot of time on the internet just reading stuff, finding cool stuff to find video ideas. Can't always do something with it, but a newsletter might be fun. So if you would like that, go ahead and leave a comment. I'm going to probably start it in January and see how it goes, but just stay tuned for that, right? All right, other than that, I'm Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and I will see you next time. Thank you once again so much for everything and just for being here.